All right, hi everyone, welcome back. Sorry for the delay. Welcome to Raising Hashem's Children, Part 3. If you missed the first two classes, there are recordings available. And we had in the first class, we spoke about an introduction to what is chinuch, what is specifically Yiddish chinuch, Hasidic chinuch, and some foundational principles in that. And then class 2, we focused on the basis of chinuch, meaning kind of our launching pad, which is Avos Hashem, Avos Torah, Avos Yisrael, and that when our children feel that we love them and we love the Yiddishkeit that we're transmitting to them, we really have kind of like a fertile ground to be able to be mechanech. So what I want to focus on for tonight is, now we have to start the chinuch, right? As we mentioned last time, sorry, we have some noise there. Please make sure you're on mute. Sorry. Okay. Okay. As you mentioned last time, the Avos Hashem, Avos Torah, Avos Yisrael, the love, the joy is really important, but it's still not chinuch. The fact that we love our children is critical to their chinuch, but that itself isn't chinuch. In other words, if we're just going to love someone, that will make them receptive, but they still haven't learned what they're going to do. So what we want to focus this time is on the other wing. We mentioned there are just like a bird with two wings, and Hashems talks about that avanira being two wings, and it can't fly just with one. What is the partner to Ava, to love? I want to start with a little piece from the Rebbe about the foundation of chinuch. And to be clear, because we're going to keep mixing up foundations, foundation meaning we start off our chinuch with a feeling of love. Everything comes from love. But the chinuch we're giving over to the children, to the mechunach, to the one who we are educating, what should be their foundation? In other words, ultimately, what should they be understanding is the basis of their Yiddishkeit. So we're looking at sort of the foundation we're giving them, not where we're starting from. And we'll try to make that distinction and clarify how that fits. V'hinei, says the Rebbe, hayesoid ha'eson ha'amiti l'chinuch. The strong, solid, and true foundation for chinuch, zehu, is hayediyah sheyesh balabayis levirazu, the knowledge that there is a boss. There is a balabayis, there is someone in charge of this bira. Literally, bira can be explained as a mansion or as a city. It comes from a mushal that's brought about someone who shows up sort of at a little island with a fancy mansion and goes like, I wonder if this belongs to anybody or who built this. Like, of course someone did. It didn't just show up out of nowhere in the middle of the ocean. So yesh balabayis lebirazu, this world did not appear out of nowhere. It is not running on its own. We didn't just land here through evolution and, we're casually just here until we're not here to do whatever we want, right? This world has a balabayis, a boss who created it, continues to create it, is directing this world and put us here specifically to serve him. There's an Eibishter. Not just like a balabayis who buys a mansion ready, who happens to own the mansion. He doesn't just happen to own the world. He created the world, Bereshis bara like him, and continues to create the world. Umanik b'hashgacha pratis, and directs it with personal, direct direction. Hashgacha pratis, every single detail of my life, of everything in the world. And what is Ritzaynai? What is the Eibishter's will? Sha'olam yisnaheg al pitzedek v'yosher, that the world should run according to the laws of tzedek, of righteousness and yosher, and justice, tzedakah, b'chesed, umishpat, etc. So Hashem is the boss of this world, who doesn't just happen to be the boss, but he created and continues to create the world. Bashgacha pratis is running every detail of this world. And why did he do that? Why did he create the world? What does he want out of this world that it should run according to the boss's instructions, according to the way he wants? with chesed, with justice, with according to all of his rules. To the point, with the goal being that it should be obvious that this home is Hashem's home, that we all follow his rules and run it the way it would be apparent that it is his universe. And this knowledge, this knowledge that there is an Eibishter and it's his world, affects a person that they will act appropriately, and then the world will be the way it is meant to be. Now, the Rebbe, actually, this sikha comes from, the context is about a moment of silence. The Rebbe is talking about the world at large. In other words, this is true even for non-Jews. I'm saying this is the foundation of education for anybody. Education is not, let's know math, right? Education, what it means to educate a child, every single human being, the foundation of education is helping them recognize, why are you here? What are you doing here? What's expected of you? And that is very simply, yesh balabayis l'birazu. There is a boss, there is an Eibishter, there is a God. You are here to serve him. And that basically looks like, for everybody, living a just and kind and good life that reflects that you are living in Hashem's world. So that applies to everyone. Allah Chazkam v'kama, how much more so does it apply to a Yiddish child? Meaning, if that's true as a foundation for everyone's kind of really Yiras Shamayim, like what can we say about a Yiddish child? And we find even more the Tanya and Perek Mem Aleph, which I've always found fascinating, that the Rebbe suggests and asks that we learn and meditate on this particular piece in Chassidus, out of the wealth, really, that is Chassidus, the tremendous amount of Tanya, Sichas Be'emar, there's so much. In addition to chitas and rotations of different things we learn, every day the same little piece we're supposed to meditate on. What is this meditation that's supposed to start off every day of a Yid? Sarech Lias, L'zikarin Tamid Perek Mem Aleph. We need to remember at all times, Reishis Ha'avodah of Ikra V'Sharsha. We're finding that same expression. What is the foundation? What is the source? What is the root? What is the bottom line of Avodas Hashem? Even though we have Yira and Ava, and there are two wings and they're both important, and essentially Yira directs us to the Sur Meirah and Ava to the Basei type. In other words, generally, there are two parts of Yiddishkeit. There are the 365 mitzvahs leisase, what we're not allowed to do. We're not allowed to do malach on Shabbos. We're not allowed to eat this or that, etc. And being careful to not do what we're not allowed to do needs to come from a certain sense of yira, a certain sense of awe and seriousness and respect of Hashem is the boss. You don't just do what you want, right? Like that's kind of what directs the keeping lois aseh. And the aseh, the yes daven, yes make kiddush, yes light Shabbos candles, yes do chesed and get tzedakah should come from a place of aseh toiv. I'm in a relationship with Hashem. I love him. I want to do what he wants, right? So one is more connected to aseh toiv, one to Sur Meirah, to Sur Meirah. But nevertheless, Afal became loy died la'er ha'av levatel v'aseh toiv. The Alter Rebbe says something fascinating. Even when it comes to aseh toiv, as much as we talk about positivity, which is so critical, even the mitzvahs of aseh toiv, which should come ideally from a place of not, I have to daven, right? We don't want that for ourselves. We don't want that for our children. That davening should feel like some sort of yachab, I have to. The leis aseh is like, okay, you can't. You like it, you don't like it, you can't. But the aseh toiv should come from more than that. The aseh toiv should come from like, I want to. Right? Like there should be an ava there. There should be a sense of I want to connect to Hashem. And that's what Chassidus is here to teach us. But nevertheless, even the aseh toiv, the positive, at the root of it, there needs to be a certain sense that at the end of the day, it's not just about ava. Yes, I love it. We talked last time about joy, and we want our children to feel that excitement for a mitzvah, and the passion for it, and we're looking forward to Shabbos and Yom Tov and Pesach and whatever the case is, and we're happy to do a favor for another Yid, Nachnosas Archem, and yay, guests are coming, right? We want to make sure they have that, but it can't be only that. At the end of the day, what if I don't feel it? Or what if I feel it some more, some less? And is it all just about, I like it? Is it all about my feelings? At the end of the day, really, is it all about me? So
might be it, you're saying, but like for the love of Hashem.
Right, or even the love of Hashem. Right, so even the love of Hashem, and what the Rebbe explains about this is really fascinating, and that is even if we're going to do it, right, and it's effective, what happens is our Yiddishkeit is essentially selfish. Because if it remains only love, only asay taiv, then the relationship is on my terms. I love. As Chassidus explains, yesh mi she'ohev is the lashon. Yesh mi she'ohev, there is some, to say I love means there is someone who loves. I have feelings. It makes me feel good. So it makes me feel good to what? To do Hashem's will. That's great. That is a really good situation to be in, but it's still not bittul. It's still about me. There's something missing there. There's something at the end of the day which is not fully MS. And the full MS is, it really makes no difference how I feel, right? It would be good if I'm happy to serve Hashem, but it can't be all about me. You know, like the expression they say about, I think we mentioned last time, about, they tell a story about a bacher who was eating fish and he was saying, I love fish, I love fish, I love fish, right? And Rav said, you know, I don't think you love fish. You love yourself. You love how fish tastes to you. If you love the fish, you would leave it in the water and let it swim. So love essentially is like, often it's hard to mix up, like to separate. I love, like I love. What does I love mean? I love means I'm getting something out of it. There's some feeling I get. And when it comes to the Eibishter, really, how is it possible to have a relationship with him? I mean, if we think about it, the whole thing is kind of absurd. We're taking a human being and we're saying a human being should have a relationship with the creator of the world, who is Ein Sof, unlimited, above everything, and we're a creation of his. We're going to have a relationship. I mean, how ludicrous would it be? I mean, maybe in today's world it's not considered so ludicrous, but let's be honest, right? For a human being to say, I have a relationship with an insect. We have a serious relationship going on. You know, we understand each other. I mean, really, you know, whatever, right? On some level. So as ridiculous as it would be to say a human being could have a real relationship with an insect, it's infinitely more ridiculous to say a creation could have a relationship with a creator. Because really all creations are in one category. We're created, we're limited, and the creator is in a totally different plane. So the whole thing makes no sense. And it's only possible because Hashem has decided it should be that way. And it's only possible because he has placed a part of himself in us. In other words, the fact that we can have a relationship with Hashem is not because we're a created being and he's the creator and somehow there's a connection. There's no what we call chassidus erech, like there's no, we're not at the same wavelength at all. But we have a part of Hashem in us, and that part of us can connect to its source, and we can relate because Hashem has decided to make it that way. But that's only if we're connecting with that part. If I see myself as a separate, independent being, I'm seeing myself as a creation. And then where is there room for me to connect to him? Right? It's kind of like, you know, I can pick up a phone and say, well, I want to talk to you. I don't know your number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And, you know, we'll talk. It's not going to work, right? It only works if there's actually, it's going to the right place. We can feel connected. We can feel spiritual. That doesn't mean we actually have a relationship going on with Hashem. It can only exist on his terms. And his terms means we leave our self-centered, independent perception of ourselves and see ourselves as a part of him and realize there's really loiniv reisi ela l'shamish es Chanie. There's nothing real to my existence other than what Hashem has given me. I'm only important. I'm very important, by the way, but I'm only important because I'm a part of Hashem. Without Hashem, I'm nothing. When I'm a part of Hashem, I'm infinite. So it's kind of tapping into this bittul, tapping into me as an independent created being. I'm nothing. Hashem is everything, and I'm part of that. That's yira, that's bittul. That's not ava. So again, ava is really important. We want to have that. But without a foundation underneath in our Yiddishkeit, that at the end of the day, I can only have a relationship with Hashem because he made it that way. I only exist because Hashem continues to place me here in this world. At the end of the day, it's not about me at all. It's Hashem's world. It's his life. It's all about him. My feelings and opinions, honestly, don't matter. They matter to the extent that Hashem wants them to matter. My actions matter because Hashem decided they should matter, right? It's kind of like taking me out of the picture taking that ego out and realizing, like, cut down to size. Enoit Movade. There's really only the Eibishter. Without that at the core of our Yiddishkeit, everything is on very quicksand ground. No. So we're not saying we can give this whole drasha to children. We're going to get to how to make this practical. But the first thing we need to understand is that our children need to get a foundation of Yiras Shamayim, because their Yiddishkeit is on quicksand without it, right? If Yiddishkeit is a nice thing that I do because it's so enjoyable and it's so meaningful, we're in trouble. I remember having a conversation once with teenagers, and maybe they didn't mean it this way, but I think it's just a good illustration of how it can go off. I don't remember the point of the discussion, but I asked at one point, what they feel is the difference when you grow up learning Chassidus and not. Like, I was curious if they understood how they understood the effect of Chassidus in their lives. So one girl looks at me and says, well, they, I guess whoever they is, right, the anonymous they who don't get to learn Chassidus yet, keep mitzvahs because they have to. So I said, and we what? Like, and if you've learned Chassidus, then what? She says, and we keep the mitzvahs because we appreciate the meaning of them. And I just remember, like, I cringed. It was like, ouch. Like, I hope you didn't mean it that way, but let's clarify something. We all do the mitzvahs because we have to. Not we have to because our parents make us do them. Not we have to because community is going to kick us out if we don't. We have to because we really have to, because we recognize Yesh Ba'alabais L'Birzu, because there's an Eibishter. We don't really get a choice in the matter. Like, who are we to tell Hashem no? What Chassidus actually adds to our lives is really understanding that, recognizing that the have to is because who is the Eibishter? Who are we? To really understand Enod Movade, that really the world doesn't happen to have a God. The whole world is being recreated by Hashem at every moment, and like it's poof, it's nothing. There's no real existence to it outside the Eibishter. You first start to appreciate what it really means. Hashem said, real Yiras Shamayim, the Eibishter, Melech Malchei Amlochim, we're here in the middle of Perek Mem Aleph, to recognize this Yira Hativis that is believed called Yisrael, back to the Tanya, how could I not listen to Hashem, who is the King of Kings of the entire universe, to have at least a certain recognition there of the greatness of the Eibishter, who is everything and everywhere, sees everything, knows everything, is directing the entire universe, the worlds we know, the worlds we don't know. And what does he care about? This awesome infinite Eibishter, who is everything, and the world would not exist without him. And I'm a tiny speck out of nowhere. Imagine like taking a zoom out, like, they have these vision from outer space, and you see the world, and you sort of realize, like, you can't even find the city that you live in, never mind for yourselves. Like, the world's a lot bigger than we are, and like, we're really not all that important. And this awesome Eibishter that we don't begin to understand the vastness of the universe he's in charge of, and that's besides the Yonim, he puts everything aside, and what does he care about? Me, personally, me, little me, and exactly the minute that I lit Shabbos candles, or exactly how many cents I gave to tzedakah, and exactly the inches of my skirt. I mean, that's crazy. It's like, wow. The significance of what I'm doing, it's not an option, like the Eibishter said. Sometimes I think, that we know that the concept of a tzaddik, Omad v'shaslan b'chol dar v'dar, the Alter Rebbe explains that Hashem places a few tzaddikim in every generation, right? What's one of the main functions of a tzaddik is to help us kind of bridge the gap in our connection to Hashem, to get a more tangible expression of Elokus in this world. So, just as a mashal, like, sometimes I think to myself, imagine we got a phone call, middle of nowhere, and the phone rings, and we pick it up, and we say, hi, who's this? This is Rabbi so-and-so, it's the Rebbe's secretary, the Rebbe wants to speak to you. Okay, the Rebbe wants to speak to me, calling me on the phone. And I get on the phone and, I'm probably shaking if I can even hear straight. The Rebbe wants to know, would you please, I need you to do this particular shluchas. Can you go to this or that place or do such and such? Now, how would any of us feel? Is it an option to say no? No. Is it because we're afraid we're going to get punished? No. Right? It's not out of fear. Is it like, oh, I feel so good, I would love to? Not really. Right? The feeling is like, obviously, like it's not even a question. It's just like the awe of, you mean the Rebbe asked me to do something? There's a combination of like absolute obligation of like, of course I will, but it's awe, it's not fear. It's this like awesomeness of, I've just been given this incredible mission that I certainly am going to do because I don't have the option not to, but I feel so privileged and so awed by being given that responsibility. That's the hero we're talking about. That it's not an option to tell the Eibishter no. The Melech Malchei Amlach HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself said, "Anoichi Hashem Elokecha." I am your personal Eibishter, he says to every single Yid. And I want you and I need you to do this particular mitzvah at this particular time because your mitzvah done by you at this moment in this place is going to accomplish something in building my home that everyone else's mitzvahs will not accomplish. And I can't do it without you. It's not an option not to. But not because someone will punish me, just because the Eibishter said. So we only appreciate what Yiras Shamayim is, what Hashem said means through Chassidus. But it's not like, oh, it's so meaningful, right? It's the awe of the Yira, of the sense of obligation that comes from a real place that we appreciate, that the Alter Rebbe is talking about here is the foundation of the Yiddishkeit. And when we have that kind of recognition, what will a Yid say? Bishvili nivra olam, the world is created for me, not the world is here to serve me. Bishvili nivra olam, this entire universe is here for me to do my avodas, all dependent on me. And that leads to a Yid serving Hashem like an Eved, like a servant, joyfully, but as a servant. It's not up for discussion if I will or if I won't. It's halacha. Hashem said. Vihine Hashem Nitzav Allah then concludes this piece with a couple of lines that the Rebbe asks every child to learn by heart, right? And this is really getting to the chinuch part of this, right? What is the bottom line for our children? The message in very simple terms, Vihine Hashem Nitzav Allah. Think out of the 12 psukim the Rebbe wants children to know. What is one of them? To constantly be thinking about the Eibishter stands above me. He's everywhere, fills the entire world with his glory. He knows everything, right? Ayin Rev Ozen Shamas, Umabit Allah, and the Eibishter is watching. He knows exactly what's going on inside. He knows my feelings. He knows my thoughts. He knows my struggles, and he wants to know, am I really doing my best to serve him? That's the bottom line. There is an Eibishter. He's the boss. He's everywhere. He knows everything. He sees everything, and he cares about my mitzvahs. That's the message we want our children to get. That's what we would call Yiras Shamayim. And if they have that, the rest of Yiddishkeit is built on that. Without it, we have mitzvahs anashim l'umada. We might say we might have, they're used to doing certain behaviors, but like, how strong is that? Is it a matter of convenience? Is society when we're not watching? We've trained them to daven and what? So you're davening because I'm looking, because the mower is going to give you a sticker, because I don't know what, right? Because we'll close the sneeze button when who knows which mower passes by. Like, how deep does the Yiddishkeit get, right? We haven't begun to serve the Eibishter, but when a child is raised, and this part they can get from the youngest ages, Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is everywhere, right? Hashem is watching, Hashem sees you, Hashem is looking at you, Hashem loves your davening. Hashem is waiting for your bracha, right? Like the Baal Shem Tov says that brachas. He told a Yid, he asked, "How are you? How are you? How's this? How's that one?" And he thought he's wasting his time. He says, "Why are you denying Hashem is parnasa?" And Hashem is waiting for the brachas of a Yid. Hashem's looking out for you, and we can use that language. We'll get to the practical application with our children. Hashem is watching, Hashem is listening, Hashem wants your mitzvahs, Hashem appreciates your mitzvahs, Hashem is proud of you, etc., etc. But we want our children to understand their mitzvahs matter to the Eibishter. Hashem knows everything, he sees everything, he cares, and we listen to what Hashem says. That's non-negotiable. So, having explained that, and maybe that's philosophical, right? But I think it's important for us to understand the concept first. Recognizing how central Yiras Shamayim is to the Yiddishkeit of our children, the question is, how do we go about giving it over to them? So what I want to take in the time we have tonight is really briefly a window into a few pieces of this. Practically, chinuch, how do we impart this to our children? Step one, and there's so much on this that I can't even begin to bring sources. I just brought one very, very basic source. Like the Rebbe says, Torah's MS teaches us that as soon as a baby enters this world, they're already being affected by everything, anything that happens around them. And we shouldn't think, oh, what does the baby see? What does the baby understand? Modern science is more and more understanding how much baby absorbs even before birth. Not only are they affected by what they eat or what the mother eats, like we know Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to nurse from a Mitzri woman because the food becomes them. But there's also the environment, what they see, what's happening around them, what's spoken about around them, what music there is, what images there are. Everything is affecting the child from within, from without. And that's the first piece. And I encourage everyone to look up the minhagim. There are many places. There are, in Hebrew, you have Shvach HaBris and some other svarim that quote it. In English, there's Chayvetz Minhagim from Sichas in English. Can also be found online, SIE.org. Chayvetz Minhagim goes through a lot of these. There are many other places that it's quoted. Of course, many of them are also in teachings of the Rabban Chinuch. There are many places to find them, but there are many minhagim that are brought down of things that we're careful with even before a baby's born. It says the kashrus and taras mishpacha of the parents, even before a child is conceived, but especially when a mother is expecting, especially a young child, what's surrounding them, like everything is affecting them. And what I mentioned that here is because Yiras Shamayim is not just a logical thing. And it's critical that we realize this idea of the neshama sensing, it's serious, there's an Eibishter, there's a balabas, I need to listen to him. It's not just something you explain, it's something that comes from inside, from the neshama, and we need to feed it the pnimius. It's like there's something ruchniistic, very ruchniistic to it. There's our own mitzvahs, as we saw, we talked about Kimches, her own tznius that affected her children's Yiras Shamayim, right? A lot of Yiras Shamayim simply has to do with not the lessons we're teaching our children, but how we're nourishing their neshama, and that's its own massive topic to explore all the details of what that looks like. But in short, it's something we want to think about, right? Like, what am I doing from the neshama, from the ruchnius perspective, that is helping them be receptive to Yiras Shamayim? Then I want to get to part two. There is a fascinating.
On the one hand, you're saying it's to predispose the child. On the other hand, it says everything is in your hand besides for your Shamayim. Like, you do have a choice.
Right. So the child, that's a great question. That everything is in the child's, Hakol b'dei Shamayim puts me Yiras Shamayim. Yiras Shamayim is always the child's choice. However, we can choose to make it easier or more difficult, right? We can choose to kind of give them, like it says about the levush, that we don't choose our children's neshamas. You can have lofty neshamas born to simple parents and vice versa, but we choose the levush of the child, which means the parent's behavior upon the conception of a child can determine that the child is born with more of a sensitivity to levus, that their neshama is more relatable, that they're more in tune with it. Some people, they're more easily inspired, they're more easily connected. Some people, there's more of a layer, there's a cynicism, there's whatever. And we can really affect, more important than how high of a level the neshama is, how easy it is for them to just be in tune with it. And that doesn't mean that they're exempt or that they're off the hook if it's harder, but if we can make it easier for them, it's a huge gift. They'll still struggle, but why should it be such an uphill battle? But yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Point two, talking about active chinuch, right? Beyond what we're feeding them, what we might call the market, sort of like the things beyond what you could explain. There's an incredible letter of the Rebbe. I encourage everyone to look it up. It's on Chabad.org and other places. A full letter of the Rebbe, Chaf of Tevis Tafshin Mem Beis, explaining why the Rebbe started Tzivos Hashem. I'm going to quote here a short piece of it. Someone here challenged the Rebbe about why Tzivos Hashem. It seems like you're introducing militaristic, violent ideas to children. What's this business with an army? You know, got them all nervous, and was really asking the Rebbe, all the chutzpah, you know, where this come from. So the Rebbe took the time to explain why it is a Torah idea, and basically why there was no other choice. This was the best option there was. Why? So the Rebbe explains first a problem, and I think first we need to recognize that it is a problem. And I want to say again, if anyone didn't watch part 2, please do so, because, you know, listening to part 2 without part 3 or part 3 without part 2 can give the wrong impression. We don't in any way mean to imply that love and positivity is not critical, because it is, and we discussed that. And yet there's another piece, and the piece is as follows. The most important aspect, says the Rebbe, in my opinion, in this day and age, is the lack of Kabbalah soil. Not only of Oil Malchus Shemayim, right, the yoke of heaven, the yoke of the Eibishter, but also general in submission to authority, including the authority of parents at home and of teachers in school, and the authority of law and order in the street. It's interesting because we may have heard growing up, like, oh, Kabbalah Sol, like listen to the teacher, listen to the principal, Kabbalah Sol, and we're like, excuse me, Kabbalah Sol is for the Eibishter. Don't mix that into it. But it's not true. There is Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shemayim, but then there's Kabbalah Sol in general, and they're intertwined. Kabbalah Sol is a trait, it's a habit, it's something you get used to. It's called obedience, right? Either I believe I'm supposed to be obedient and I'm used to being obedient, or I'm not. And they have a lot to do with each other. A child who's trained in general Kabbalah Sol will be able to transfer that to Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shemayim, right? If I'm told by authority and I need to listen, then I understand that halacha is non-negotiable, right? And Torah says, and Hashem says, and I have to listen. But if there's no authority in general, and it's sort of do what you want and self-directed and whatever you think, it's very hard to wrap my head around the idea that, like, some things are just, it really doesn't matter how you feel. It's not kosher, or it's a malach on Shabbos, etc. There remains only the fear of punishment as a deterrent, but that fear has been reduced to a minimum because there has been in recent years what amounts to a breakdown of law enforcement for reasons which need not be discussed here. It's fascinating because we're talking about the early 1980s. You think that I was talking now. This is 40 years ago, and that I was already discussing, seeing how society is breaking down because the concept of authority is no longer a real, it's no longer a major factor in our society, especially here in the Western world. The idea that you have to listen, there's only, you better listen, because otherwise you get in trouble. But even that, we've undermined law enforcement. So there's nothing really getting anyone to behave. And this is a problem that I'm saying, not just, because of crime or whatever, like it's an essential problem. And the Rebbe explains what, why is this happening? Because what's happening in America, as opposed to teaching Kabbalah Sol, obedience, you listen. And again, we'll discuss the difference between authoritarian and authoritative, because there's a huge difference, and we're not talking about living in Tsarist Russia. Yeah. Okay. Okay. On the other hand, the Rebbe says, American children have been brought up on the spirit of independence and freedom, and on the glorification of personal prowess and smartness. It has cultivated a sense of cockiness and self-assurance to the extent that one who is bent on mischief or antisocial activity feels that one can outsmart a cop on the beat and even a judge on the bench. And in any event, there is little to fear in the way of punishment. So what has happened? With good intentions, because always what happens is when there's a problem, society swings to the opposite. But Torah teaches us that the opposite of one problem is also a problem. Most times an extreme is a problem. So the solution to one extreme is not another extreme, it's balance. As the Rambam says, that the Shvil Azov, the golden path, is the middle road. There are only two things we avoid to the extreme, and they are anger and gaiva. Thank you. Anger and arrogance. Everything else we go in the middle path. Everything. And I think a lot of our we get a lot more clarity in our chinuch if we remember just this concept: balance. If one thing is a problem, the solution is not the other extreme. So we went from a place of rejecting authoritarianism, rejecting like no one has any right, you have no control over anything, and you better listen or else, and you have no rights and no freedoms, to like, okay, so it's all about freedom. It's all about how you feel. It's all about what you want to do. This is kind of the spirit of America, which is very nice and wonderful in many ways, or the liberal spirit. But what has happened is we're kind of teaching children in the Western world, it's about you, whatever you feel, it's progressively gone in many different directions, at risk of being misunderstood. Again, I'm not looking to say this, the entire thing is something wrong with it, but we have to be careful. A lot of the trends, for example, in early childhood, a lot of the trends in gentle education and parenting or whatever, and self-directed, like it's very easy to go just a bit off, right? It's not to say, sure, just give me a second, right? That's not to say we don't want to make sure that we're being loving. And as we discussed last time, like if we can encourage a child with a positive, like why go with the negative? Even something we need to say can be said gently. It shouldn't be done out of anger, right? We take our ego out of it. There shouldn't be a place for anger and criticism and negativity and shaming and all of that. Like all of that, according to the Frierdiker Rebbe, doesn't belong in chinuch at all. But that doesn't mean there aren't rules. That doesn't mean there aren't boundaries. That doesn't mean there aren't expectations of the child. It doesn't mean the child can do whatever they want and direct how they want their education to be. Right? There still needs to be authority. There still needs to be some sort of security and expectations of there is the parent, the teacher who is here to teach them. And we're going to do it in a loving and kind and supportive way, but not the message of sort of whatever floats your boat, however you want. Oh, you're not in the mood, no problem. Right? Because then we're not really educating the child. And it's really easy to, I would just add here before I get to the question, and before we get to the solution on this that the Rebbe suggests, there's another fascinating source from the Rebbe. The Rebbe explains that there's a mitzvah, v'ahavta l'orecha kamocha. We all know that mitzvah. We're very familiar with it. We spent last class on it. V'ahavta l'orecha kamocha is very important. However, says the Rebbe, when v'ahavta l'orecha kamocha becomes an excuse not to fulfill the other mitzvah, v'chech t'chiach esam yisecha, in relation to our children, not in a bad way, but simply to teach them right from wrong, to give them boundaries, to teach them what to do, to at times in a loving and kind and positive way, but clearly communicate to them when something is inappropriate or needs to happen, etc. When v'ahavta l'orecha kamocha leads us to refrain from teaching and directing and guiding our children, then the Rebbe says that would fall into the category of loisosif, of adding to a mitzvah. You're not allowed to, just like you're not allowed to add like a fifth, there are 4 minim on Sukkot, or 4 pashas and tefillin, etc. You're not allowed to add a fifth, right? You can't add to a mitzvah. That's loisosif. That's adding inappropriately to a mitzvah. Like v'ahavta l'orecha kamocha means exactly what it is, that our chinuch needs to come from love. The child needs to sense that it's coming from love. It needs to always be done kindly, without anger, without ego, etc., etc. But there does need to be chinuch, and it can't stop us from actually directing our children. I'm going to stop here and take some questions, so that I don't want to leave that concept misunderstood before we go further. Go ahead.
Okay, so when it comes, it's like, how much of it do you need it to be the same, and how much is different? Because when it comes to Kabbalah Hashem, it's, even if you don't feel like doing the mitzvah, sorry, feelings aside, you do it, and then you can for sure learn about it, ask questions, why do I do it, understand it. But let's say when it comes to parenting, it's always empathy first. When you tell your kid to do something and they're like, no, I don't want to do it, I understand it's hard for you. There's all the empathy first, and then figuring out how to make it work,
Right.
How they could do it, but still, on their, not on their terms, but like them still wanting to do it instead of forcing
Yes.
you. So how much, but then you said like when it's still Kabbalah self and you're parenting, let's say, then it helps them with Kabbalah self.
Okay, great question. How similar should the Kabbalah Soul be that we're transmitting at home in terms of parents' authority to Kabbalah Soul Malcha Shemayim? My understanding from this and in general other sources from the Rebbe is that it should be similar. In other words, Yiddishkeit should never feel bossy, forced, negative, but nasa v'nishma, right? There has to be the understanding that we can discuss why later, but for now, it is what it is. And I think the same thing is with parenting. In other words, the empathy doesn't take away from nasa v'nishma. We can start off with empathy. That's great. I can see you're really upset. All right. It's still bedtime. Okay. In other words, right. It's still, I empathize. That's fine. We should always empathize. It's very good to empathize. It is totally beneficial and positive and the right thing to do to help a child realize I'm not against you. You know, I understand your feelings. You still need to do this because it just is what it is. Now, you want to know why? We can talk about it another time. I'm not going to, in other words, your nasa v'nishma means you doing what you need to do does not depend on your understanding it. I don't have to explain it to you for you to listen. It's smart to explain it to you. You know, Chassidus, we believe in Nishma. We believe that we shouldn't have a mindless Yiddishkeit where we can't figure out, you know, what is meaningful about the mitzvahs and Avodas Hashem in general. We can go learn about it, but first you keep it, and then we can go learn it. Not, I need to understand it and appreciate it. It needs to be meaningful to me, like, you know, like that anecdote for me to do it, right? And the same thing I think really is in parenting, right? With all the empathy and understanding, without anger, without ego, it just is. I shouldn't have to, exactly. I shouldn't have to explain myself. Exactly. Because mommy said so, because Tati said so. And ideally, because it just is, because it's bedtime. Because those are the rules in the house. What? Okay, so we're gonna get to, right, what dealing, right, with the misbehavior, but the starting point needs to be, I think, really confidence. I think anyone, for example, who teaches in a classroom knows that when it comes to learning how to discipline, right, how to have, I don't like the word control, how to have effective classroom management, right? We're not going to control the kids. We're looking to manage the classroom effectively. So much of it cannot be explained logically. A lot of it is presence. And presence is confidence. Meaning, if I walk in feeling like, okay, I am the Mora here. It doesn't matter if I'm 18 or whatever. I am the Mora. And I absolutely am in the position that I should expect the children to be respectful and do what I'm telling them to do. I am not going, you know, laughing at myself and like, oh my goodness, I'm only a few years older than them. And how can they, like, you know, none of that. I'm totally feeling secure in my position and confident that, like, yes, they should be listening. And I know what I'm talking about and I'm doing the right thing. And I have all the right to take kind and appropriate authority, and the children need that authority, right? They need that, and that's what I'm here to do. So I'm feeling confident. Children pick up on that confidence. In fact, the teachers who come in mean are often the ones who are not confident. You know, when we're extra strict or extra mean, that's not the expression of confidence. That's, I'm so insecure that I need to, I don't know, bark at you. We're not talking about being mean. We're talking about just a real inner confidence that a teacher walks in, the children pick it up, they smell it. They're like, don't mess. You know, you just don't mess. You listen to this teacher, not because you're afraid, but because you get it. She's the authority. You trust them. Exactly. Precisely. They're giving off a sense of, you can trust me. I know what I'm doing. And children want that. And the same thing is with parents. They're waiting. They're pushing the boundaries, waiting to hear, do you know what you're doing? Are you a parent here? Like, do you have a clear idea where we're going? Because I'm a little child. I have no idea what we're doing. I definitely don't know how to navigate this world. This is pretty scary. You know where we're going? Okay, good. Oh, you're not sure? You're looking at me? In fact, the Frierdiker Rebbe says something, you know, yeah, Frierdiker Rebbe has a very unique lashon that's often a very, very interesting brand of sarcasm sometimes. You have to get used to the Frierdiker Rebbe's lashonos. They're rich. So the Frierdiker Rebbe describes how it says in the generation before Mashiach comes, Pnei Hadar Pnei HaKeleb, the face of the generation will be like the face of a dog. Can be explained in many ways, but this is the Frierdiker Rebbe's explanation. The generation before Mashiach, the Pnei, the Panim, like the leaders who are the face of the generation, the leaders of the generation, including leaders in the home, the parents, the teachers, or societal, government, everybody, like on all levels, the leaders will be Kipnei HaKelev, will be like the dog. Why the dog? Because the dog is always looking over its shoulder to check that its master is behind him. Oh yeah, where am I supposed to go? Okay, like it might run ahead, but it's always looking back. So says the Frierdiker Rebbe, the leaders in the generation before Mashiach comes will be constantly looking over their shoulder to see the people they're leading. Where do you want me to go? Instead of having the clarity of leadership of like, I know where we're going and I'm going to have that conviction and guide you. It's like, okay, what's popular opinion? Let's check social media. Let's find out what's happening on Twitter. That's the new policy, you know, like that's going to be the generation. It's an incredible concept. I think we're, as parents, that's affecting us. We're living in that kind of world and we're thinking like, you know, we look at our kid and they're upset. Okay, you know, so maybe not. Then I guess we're having something else for supper. You know, I guess it's not that time. It's time to read some more books because that's what the kids want. And that's not leadership and that's not love either, right? It's just a lack of confidence. And as much as our children need love, they desperately need love. They also equally need security. They need to know that there is leadership, there is guidance. My parents know what they're doing. I can trust them and the boundaries, they're safe. I can rely on those boundaries. So when they're testing our boundaries, the first thing, and the same thing applies in a classroom and with our children, is consistency. I've noticed that the hardest thing ever when it comes to discipline is when we're inconsistent. If something is an always rule, if it's always the case that your bedtime is always 7:30 or 8 o'clock or whatever, then that's bedtime. But if sometimes I'd let you stay up late, then it's like, well, why not now? You sometimes let me, right? And it's like, maybe tonight's also negotiable. If something's negotiable or they sense we're not totally committed to that or sure about that, then there's room to play around. If it's out of the question and it just is, and it's always the rule, it's much easier for a child to understand. So I think a lot of it starts with our own confidence. Like if it's a rule, are we sure it's a rule, or was it just like in the moment we felt like saying no? No, did we consciously come up with the rules in our home for a reason, and we know why we came up with them? We didn't have to tell it to the children always. Maybe at some point we did, you know, maybe when they harassed us for, I don't know what junk for supper, you know, we stopped and said we eat healthy food in our home or whatever, right? But like, we felt like we needed to explain as we went along every single thing we did. But we understand what the rules are. We find our ways to communicate them. We'll talk next time, Hashem, more about communicating values effectively. But the bottom line is we know why we have the rules we have. We communicate them clearly. We're consistent about them. If we just hold on the fort, like one of the greatest techniques with that is what they call broken telephone. It's bedtime. It's 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock is bedtime. Like just repeat the same thing. Like you could talk to a wall. I'm not getting angry. You're not going to start getting a reaction at me. This just is, you know, and like,
If you see that it's not.
they give up.
And then you stop.
So a lot depends on if, you know, when a child is misbehaving, there could be so many things. And
Like, this is what's for supper tonight. Child is physically not eating and mouth is closed, whatever it is, like.
right, I think we talked a
Not
little
gonna
bit
be able
last
to
time.
force
Yes,
them.
right.
Doesn't
There
matter.
are specific things where we need to be aware, especially in a young child, but at any age, that there are some things that they're not up to doing because of the difficulty they have. That's what we discussed last time, knowing your child, but that the issue starts before. In other words, I've got myself into trouble. Once I've given a child a rule, I know they can't really keep. Like if I'm expecting, you know, if I've taken a 3 or 4-year-old, by the way, Shul is not a babysitting service. If they have a kids program, that's really nice, right? But if we send off, because we want like an easy Shabbos morning, we send off a 3-year-old to shul and expect them to sit quietly near their tati, and then they're getting in trouble 65 times for not being quiet and making noise. We've set up our child for misbehavior in a way that's not age appropriate. Like we asked for something that didn't make any sense. So when we set up the situation in the first place, it has to be that we believe our children can keep that rule generally, that it's a normal expectation of them, and then we can hold our ground. You know, and once in a while when a child's misbehaving, there are various ways of dealing with it. Of course, you know, sometimes distraction, sometimes the positive reinforcement, like there are many ways of navigating a situation, but ideally when it comes to discipline, it's not about what do I do once they're misbehaving, but did I plan this properly? Like, am I putting my child in a situation that makes sense? So for example, if I'm going to serve something that I know my child has an aversion to, and then I'm going to insist like you need supper, I know what's coming, right? So right. So if I don't know, feeding is its own thing. Right. Right. So, you know, a lot of times, I don't want to get into all the details, you know, and there are many shitties out there on like exactly how to manage discipline. Just some things I found to be helpful. Some things are worth ignoring. Yeah, some things are worth just like pretending it didn't happen and like just not making an issue of it and letting it pass, like because the child might just be hungry, tired, acting cuckoo, and like making it more of an issue than it is, and just like, you know, ignoring it in the moment sometimes is helpful. Like ignore is a good technique. Often they're looking for our attention, so if we're not going to give it the negative attention, just sort of move on with what we have to do, that is what it is. Like, I mean, I don't want to get into the whole thing about each topic, like feeding, like no, I don't think it's generally considered smart to force a child to eat. But it's like, okay, that doesn't mean I have to make you something else. Like, this is what there is for supper. You know, you can eat, you cannot eat. Like, again, that's its own massive topic, what to do with a child who, when I have some of those, you know, who have difficulty eating and whatever, like each thing is its own. At times we need to explore solutions. What's going to work for this child in this particular issue? But like as a general rule, we want to set our child up for expectations that are reasonable, be confident in the expectations we're giving. And then once we've set them, it is what it is. You can, you know, there's natural consequences, sort of like if you don't eat, you'll be hungry. I'm not making something else, you know, whatever, unless someone believes in doing that. But the point is, like, the more our children realize there's a way out, so they'll take the way out. If bedtime is just bedtime, and that is what it is, and you get to, I don't know, watch read the video or whatever other benefit you get if you're in bed on time, and that's what, like, then the bedtime was the bedtime, or whatever people are, you know, it doesn't have to be mean, it's just, it's past your bedtime. And when a child learns there are natural consequences, the rule is the rule, it is what it is. They just get a sense of you're supposed to listen. And it's not about, I remember seeing an expression someone's putting out there about like, you know, what if you, sometimes you might feel you're doing like gentle or loving parenting and it's not working. Well, that's the problem. The point is not that it has to work. The point is that we're looking to build our children's love, or, you know, feeling loved and whatever. Now, I argue with that. It is supposed to work, not because we're supposed to have an easier life that our children are behaving, right? It's not about us. It's not we do parenting because we just need to get our kids in bed on time because we need a quiet night, so it has to work. That's not the reason it has to work. They need to learn Kabbalah Soil. They need to learn discipline. They need to learn Yiras Shamayim. So if they're not learning it, that's a problem. Now, if they're learning it slower than we want them to, or in a way that's more challenging for us, then too bad on us, right? Like that's parenting, right? If it doesn't go as easily as we want, but there has to be progress. We have to see the child is getting the message. A rule is a rule, and expectation is an expectation. You have to listen. If they're not getting that, it's very nice I'm being loving, so the love they might be getting, but there's another piece they're not getting, and I need to figure that out, right? That there are two parallel goals, and they have to work together. So somehow we need to figure out how that's happening and brainstorm with our individual child, with the individual thing we're looking to teach them how to navigate that solution. But the starting point has to be not, I need them to behave, and not, I'm looking to control them. The starting point needs to be, am I teaching my children Kabbalah Soil? Because if they don't learn Kabbalah Soil at home, and it's whatever you want, however you want, and you can get away with everything, being a Yid is really hard. There's, again, the Rebbe says it's even for not Yidden, right? Even a non-Jewish child has to know you have to listen. But how much more so a Yiddish child, that our whole avodas Hashem is like, Yiras Shamayim. Where's Yiddishkeit begin if it's all self-centered? Yes.
Small question. You said like you have to set up your expectations properly, so like it's not really a little bit off. But like, is it inconsistent if, let's say, you do set an unreasonable expectation and realize that things are not working out because your expectation was unreasonable, so you like?
For sure, of course we can adjust. Yes,
like,
it is.
It's
It's
like, should you be like stubborn, like, oh, like
Right,
That's
no,
unreasonable, but you have to
right.
learn
If
that
we've
when
set
I
up an
say-
unreasonable expectation, we definitely need to figure a way out of it, ideally not in the moment. But that's, goes back to the thing that we keep quoting about the Rebbe Rashab and half an hour a day of thinking about the chinuch of our children. Yes, we need to constantly kind of take a step back, think about what we're expecting of different children, what they should be doing, what's working, what's not working. We might have different rules for different children in terms of what we expect them to do at different ages or whatever. But, and yes, we see we made a mistake. We need to figure out how to sometimes, again, ignore. Sometimes you can casually take a new route and no one has to make an issue out of it. Sometimes we need to explain to the child, you know what, we're going to change this or that because, you kind of have to decide what makes more sense. But of course, we shouldn't be stuck on our high horse because I said, so I'm going to do something ridiculous for the next who knows how many years. But we just don't want to be wishy-washy. We want to do consciously. Yeah, and again, in the moment, we can always choose to ignore sometimes. But it can't be that the child gets the general impression you get away with whatever you want. Overall, we need to know that generally the rules and expectations we have for our children are reasonable and we're able to enforce them, and that's just that. And if it happens that we feel like they're not enforceable, then we need to go back to the drawing board and say, well, wait,
It's like in the moment
what's
when
going on?
you're like, forget it, you're not getting any.
Right.
And then it's like, well, that's really unreasonable because they were waiting for this for
Right.
so long, and like they take
Right, and that's the problem, is that that's not a conscious choice we made in chinuch to be like, well, you're not going to come to your sister's I don't know what, you're not coming to the upshare initiative, like really, no kidding, you're not going to come, I could take you to the hospital if you didn't like threats are ridiculous. Like the Rebbe says about MS, about truth, that we should never say an untruth to a child or a promise that we can't fulfill because we undermine the child's ability to learn MS. So we want to be super careful. We don't tell the child something that we're not going to stand by. And we're talking more about like a rule in the home, you need to set a rule. Yeah, no, not like a threat. We want to try not to threaten our kids for many reasons, right? But we're talking about rules, we're talking about expectations, like behavior at the supper table. We don't play with food or throw the food, or we sit still for a certain amount of time. We taste what's on our plate, whatever the rules are. This is bedtime. This is what we do before bedtime. This is when we do or do not, have permission to have a treat, whatever, right?
Not something that's really a rule, just, can I have something, like, example, that you wrote last night, you can drink my bottle, and I wasn't in the mood to drink my bottle, and I said no, but sometimes I do let them drink my bottle.
Right, so it is okay to sometimes allow a child something that they want and sometimes not. But the problem often, I think, is that we don't really know why we said no. There's like an instinctive, don't bother me, no. No, can I, whatever, we didn't even hear the other half of the sentence, no. But like, if you knew to me enough, you know what, actually, yes. And if our no wasn't really a no, then that's why we're in trouble. And it's something to work on. I know, for myself, like it's not easy, but it's I think important to try to be conscious of, are we sure we want to say no? Because it's really not a good idea to back off of it afterwards. So if I'm not sure my no is really a no, then don't say no. So say yes. Like I should have a reason to say no if I said no. And if I did, then it should stay that way. Because the more a child, again, it's not like the world's going to collapse one time I change my mind. Exactly. Exactly. If I said no out of annoyance, and that's why really we started with the concept of chinuch and the self. Yes, you can say not right now, or let me think about it exactly, right? But once I've said no, I've made a statement to a child, it means something.
It's not wrong.
And yes, and a child can know there are some things that are maybe, there are some things that are absolutes in our home. There are some things that, it depends. Sometimes we do this particular thing, but if our child can't figure us out, and it's just sort of depends on mommy's mood, and if they don't have confidence that we know what we're saying and why we're saying it, that's really where we get into trouble. So I think a lot of it is just paying attention to are we reflexively saying things? Yes, no, whatever, or do we stop? Do we get our ego out of it for a moment and actually think wait, what do I want to answer? And of course we're going to make mistakes, but the more we can try to give our children consistency and clarity about expectations and not be wishy-washy, the more they're going to get the sense that they can trust us, and the more they're going to understand that a no actually means no. Because if mommy's no means maybe, or depends how much you nudge, like, wait, what does it mean that something is no in halacha? Like, it's very hard to separate the two, and automatically it transfers there.
Yeah, but
So-
automatically there, so like, let's say if you have a relationship supper and then they want to eat something that's not like so, no is a no, because you're very confident about it. Like, it's all about, like, I'm just adding to what you said, like, if we're confident.
Precisely.
We know that we are, that like we thought, no, okay, so we don't have to think about eating something not kosher every single time, because you already like made up our mind that it's not kosher, we can't eat it. So.
Right, but
So
for our
kids can
children,
get it, so they can get it.
they can get that there are some
Mhm.
things that are non-negotiable and some things that
Right.
aren't, but there needs to be a clear sense of what is and what isn't. It could be that there are some things that it will depend on the day, it will depend, if mommy is up to it or whatever, but in terms of a rule,
It shouldn't depend on the energy.
a rule shouldn't depend on nudging, whatever it is. It could be mommy might have time for something or might not have time for something. Yeah, it's okay that mommy decides sometimes to give you a treat and sometimes, it's not like a regular thing. It's okay that there are some things that are, mommy will decide when, but not rules. Let's be clear that there are rules, and then there are just sort of extra privileges or things that could depend on the time. But the idea of a rule being a rule, and a rule is not to be played around with, and no, it's not a matter of how much you're gonna nudge. And it's so much easier. Often we think like, oh, love. Love is not permissiveness. In fact, it's more selfish. It does more for us to say yes at times, in terms of like, get away with whatever you want, do what you want. Like, it's the easier route. That's not love. If we actually love our children, right, not self-love, we think what's good for them. Do I want my child to throw a tantrum in the supermarket? No, because you know what everyone's gonna think of me? I'm gonna have everyone staring at me. I look like the most dysfunctional mother on the planet. Is so embarrassing. I will do anything to avoid a tantrum, including letting a child have what I wouldn't have let them have, or whatever the case might be. That's not about the child, that's about me.
Or what if I don't have purpose right now?
And of course, and I don't have to deal with it, and I can't deal with the fighting and whatever else. And we have lots of valid excuses, right? Because we're often tired, overwhelmed, whatever. We're not lacking in very valid reasons to feel like, get off my skin, get out of my hair and do whatever. It's very understandable that we feel that way. But when we're parenting that way, what we're essentially denying the child is a healthy foundation of discipline. And the more that happens, the harder it gets. So,
So let's say especially for like first-time parents, very young kids, 1, 2.
Mhm.
Tell me how to take care of
so,
it.
right, so how to feel confident, I would say the first, right. You know what, it does. It does, and I want to say this, the starting point is remembering that Abishter gave me this child. I am their parent. Abishter doesn't make mistakes. If I am this child's parent, it doesn't matter if it's my first or my 10th, Blaine Hara or whatever. If Hashem gave me this child, then he trusts me to know what to do. If I'm not sure, I should have mashpia. I should have people I consult with, right? In general, about like, am I doing something reasonable? Am I having general, reasonable expectations of the child? But I need to trust myself because Hashem trusts me. If Hashem trusted me with his child, I can trust myself at least that much. And yes, I might make mistakes, but I can't second guess myself. Like, if I feel this is important, so it's important. And the truth is, in many things, it doesn't even really matter if I'm right or wrong, right? As long as I'm not doing something hurtful or mean to the child, in terms of like, what is the right bedtime or what is not the right whatever, or what, how important is this or isn't this? A lot of the things don't matter nearly as much as the clarity and the confidence a child gets. Like, for example, often parents argue about rules or chinuch of the children. And it's like, no, but I'm right, but it's really harmful. And the truth is, what is most problematic for the child is if parents don't agree on their chinuch. If you're on the same page and it's not something abusive or disastrous or dangerous or whatever, it's probably better that they're getting clarity and confidence than the exact detail of, what I decided. So a lot of it is just deciding, like, Hashem trusts me, I will trust myself, I'm the child's parent, I not just deserve, they need me to be an authority figure in their life, and to the best of my ability, to the best of my knowledge, I'm gonna establish guidelines and rules for them. I'm gonna continue learning, I'm gonna continue reading, I'm gonna continue reaching out for guidance, but I'm gonna be the child's parent, and I definitely know a lot more about parenting them than they do, that's for sure. right? We're all learning, but the child definitely doesn't know better than me. And that's, it's really just starting from that point. That's all.
Expectations from different kids and navigating how they see it. Like, especially when they're really little, like my 3-year-old gets annoyed that my 2-year-old doesn't have the same rules as he does. But how do you tell them, like, she's little, but like it's a different kind of behavior?
It's a tough question, having different rules for different children.
It's like different rules. It's like, it doesn't necessarily mean like different rules. It's not like different expectations. Like, let's say now we're cleaning up. Like, she put 2 magnets on his way, and that's wonderful. You have to clean up the rest of it.
I think age helps, like letting a child know, I like the language of the older we get, the more privileges we get, and the more expectations we have, more responsibility we have. So, for example, right, obviously, if they're too similar, we want to think about, like, we always want to think, is it smart? I do have a way of explaining it, but when there is a rational basis for making a difference, we can find something, just like you go to sleep a little later, or you get to be up for whatever, or you get to, I don't know what, you go to on the school bus to school and they don't get whatever we can find that shows them a difference in, like, you're older, you get different privileges, or there are other things that, and the older we get, the more responsibility we have, and things like that.
This is what mom said we have to do. Because it doesn't matter what the age.
Yes, they should, which is saying when they want to understand, it's okay that they understand.
Sometimes it's like an excuse, like, oh, this was staying up at
Right, and this is your bedtime. At some point, you want to understand why. Again, we believe in Ishma, just it shouldn't depend on that. I shouldn't have to explain it to you for you to understand. You need to listen to mommy, but it is definitely a good idea to explain to our children why we do things. One more.
I have 2 and 1, he's older, like,
Right.
do different things, but sometimes I'll just, like, for example, a little train table. The goal originally was he can't train table. Now that his little sister knows how to.
Right.
I can't stop.
It's complicated, right? So as we can explain, the baby doesn't understand.
But he doesn't understand that.
Right.
I mean, he does, but.
Complicated. I think a lot of these are individual questions where it's sort of like a lot depends on the particular dynamics.
Am I inconsistent for just letting that flow? And now I don't.
Sometimes if we can't figure out a rational way to do things, yeah, we can let the whole thing go and say, you know what, I'm not even going to make an issue out of it instead of confusing the child. I could say I'll wait till they're a little older to start enforcing it, whatever, that might be a smart thing to do. The last thing I want to do is confuse them. But once I've decided they should now be expected to do such and such, then I need to be consistent. Yeah, you know what? Let me get to some more of the specific ones later. Okay, I want to move on and then take some more questions afterwards. Okay, right. So again, our basic point here, and I'm happy to stay later for some more questions, is simply the idea that, like, there will always be, and this is where we need to have mashpia, this is where we need to have our half an hour a day thinking about our children's chinuch, ideally when possible, with the husband together, like really just strategizing. If no each child, very unique situations come up with each child, and like, how do I apply this? But the starting point needs to be, am I helping my child learn Kabbalah in a loving way? Right? There can be many versions of how to do that, but that has to be a factor. Okay, so the Rebbe comes up with a solution. Right now that we understood point 2, we had number 1, it's getting late. Number 1, Yerushalayim is a makif thing, it's a neshama thing. Number 2, Yerushalayim is very much related to Kabbalah. So the basic level of Yerushalayim, the most basic level is Kabbalah. So you listen. There's an Eibishter, he's the boss. You listen, and that is cultivated by an environment at home of authoritative parenting. Again, not authoritarian. Authoritarian is, it's about me and my power and how dare you, and you better, and otherwise you're going to get punished. This is not about us asserting our power over our children. This is about giving children clear direction. Since I'm the parent and I'm obligated to teach you and guide you, this is what it is. It just is. It's just clear and it's authoritative, and they gain the confidence and security, and that's an essential piece in their Yerushalayim. So the Rebbe says, how do we build Yerushalayim in a generation where it's doesn't exist? And clearly from the Rebbe, it's a problem that it doesn't exist. So therefore, the Rebbe created Tzivos Hashem which is pretty much the last model we have left in our society of authority. There's an army, there is obedience, you're expected to listen, you don't get to decide which rules you want to keep, and like, that's the only model a child has for it's non-negotiable. But even with that, the Rebbe was saying, the Rebbe goes on to explain that Tzivos Hashem should be something a child will voluntarily submit to. In other words, I'm not going to force it on you, but I'm going to teach you this is what Yiddishkeit looks like, and I'm going to, with positive reinforcement, you kind of motivate them to take it on. Like, of course, there is, we're talking about teaching the message to the child. That's the point. It's not about creating a scary, forced atmosphere. It's about getting the child used to the system that you listen. Like, we're just positively and happily training them to see rules as non-negotiable and expectations as, you know, they're supposed to meet. Okay, so that's authority and discipline. I want to speak a little bit more about the next two, and then we'll open up for more questions. So that was two, right? Really asking ourselves, is Kabbalah soil, as much as love has to be a major factor in the home, is Kabbalah soil a factor in our parenting? I want to just say one more thing actually about that, one more little piece. My personal experience with this is that we're living in a generation that is emotionally fragile. There could be many reasons to this. We could sit there and pontificate forever about why it is, and some of it is maybe beyond explanation. It's just one of the nisyonos of our generation. I don't mean to undermine it at all. Like, I think we're all suffering from it. We're much less resilient than previous generations, and emotional challenges are much more prevalent. The question is, how do we help our children? How do we help them build the emotional resilience that they need? Yes, they need to feel loved. Yes, they need to feel, it's really important that there be a healthy relationship, and they also need to feel confident, resilient, capable. And sometimes, just like we talked about with the Ab and the Yira, finding that balance is a little bit complicated, because on the one hand, we want to be involved in our children's lives. We want to be showing them that we care for them, that we empathize, that we're around, we're there, right? It's not just like the olden days of like children should be seen and not heard. No, absolutely not. They should feel that we're involved in our lives and that we care, and they can come to us and they can talk to us and they can have an open relationship. That's really, really important. And yet sometimes too much of that, like beyond the Yiras Shamayim issue on an emotional level, can really cripple a child. So what happens often is we can have a child, let's say, with anxiety, like who's born with that tendency, and the natural instinct when you love your child is to protect them. And I remember, like, I started doing the same thing. I had a child who had major anxiety, and I couldn't even take to the grocery store because he'd have a meltdown from like all the sensory input and whatever, and like everything was just frightening. He was scared of his own shadow, of like dust flying in the air at night, of walking to the restroom himself. Like everything was just terrifying. And I was just doing what I think, you know, a mother naturally does when you feel for your child and you love them, is you just try to shield them from the discomfort and the pain. And you're just like, okay, so you're scared, so I'll help you. And like, I'll protect you, and I won't make you do this or won't make you do that. And it wasn't getting better. It was just getting worse, until I was very fortunate to get some sound advice that is not the way to help your child with anxiety. To coddle them, you have to teach them they can handle in a loving, kind, but firm way. And as I learned to do that, it was literally a whole different world. And I'm so grateful. It was so simple, but it was counterintuitive. It was like the child would come and say, I can't walk to the restroom myself. Could you walk me? And I was taught to say, I can wait for you in the dining room or in the hallway. Which do you prefer? Like, here's the choice, but I can meet you till here. So I gave him the choice. And he was like, okay, the hallway. All right. And that was just that. And he walked himself, and the world didn't fall apart. And then it was all good. Or he would come in the middle of the night and say, there's a piece of dirt flying in the air and I'm so scared. Right now, naturally, it could just feel like, okay, fine, so come sleep in my bed. right? And this is not about whether I do or don't want a child sleeping in my room. That's not the point. The point is the child's feeling secure and competent and confident and growing out of a fear. So I would have to say, that sounds really scary. Can you go back to bed by yourself, or do you need a hug first? So he looked at me and went, I need a hug. Like, all right. So we got a nice big hug, and that was that. And went back to sleep. It works for most children. So and I'm saying this because I've seen a lot of it. I mean, child, running down 3 flights of stairs almost into the street from seeing a cat. I've done like real fears. But when a child knows, with the same thing, I'm transmitting confidence. Not I'm confident in me, I'm confident in you. You can do this. It's okay. I remember there was a period of time we were just going around a whole day going, it's okay. It's okay. You're all right. Now, with empathy, with love, and I can give you a hug, but not I'm scared for you, because the child's anxious. They look at us and they see us afraid for them. And we're basically saying, I'm afraid you can't handle this. Right? So I really for sure can't handle this. And it's just, right. And I'm afraid you're gonna handle it. I'm afraid you're gonna.
It's really scary.
Yeah. And he just needs some empathy. But when we transmit, at some point they have to get over it, and the point is they don't get over it by themselves. It doesn't just happen. It doesn't magically disappear because we empathize. That's a myth I really believe we've been sold. Just empathizing with them is not enough to get rid of the fear if we're going to buy into it. So they need to get the empathy, and then they need to get a sense of our confidence. You can do this. And choices help. What?
Whatever messages we give them, they tell us.
Precisely.
I say with my kids, I'll say that sometimes use their credit card. We can
Right.
And one of my kids did something and was really proud of me. He did it. He's yeah, because I could do things that are harder than
Amazing.
And
That was great. Yes, the messages, and I think we all know this because we all carry our parents' messages for a lifetime. They become voices in our own head. What we tell them become their own voices. And if we tell them, you can do this, they're telling themselves, I can do this, like you just said, right? And if we're transmitting, even if we don't actually say it, sort of like when you leave a child with a babysitter or in preschool for the first time or whatever, and you leave them there and you're feeling guilty, like you're the most horrible mother ever, because which mother leaves her child in the care of somebody else? So you're like, you're falling apart inside. You're terrified what's going to be and how they're going to be damaged. You're already seeing them in therapy in 30 years over the fact that the separation anxiety they created for them. So you're feeling really insecure. You leave them, you put them in the room, and then you're like, you go outside the door, you open the door again, peek inside to check how they're doing, close the door again. The child picks up, the mother is very insecure about this, really scared, and you know what the child's going to do? Cry a lot. Versus, this is totally, and again, check with your mashpia at what age and what and where and whatever, right? But yes, it is totally a normal thing at a certain point for a parent to leave their child in the case, in the care of somebody responsible, and that's reasonable. And everyone can have their own opinions about at what age and to what degree and whatever, that's all fine. But when you left your child, that means you've decided it's fine. So first stop and give yourself the confidence, this is okay. My child can handle. It's all right. They'll be okay. Smile. I love you. I'll be back. Mommy's going. I'll be back later. Shut the door. Don't turn back. Don't stare into the window. Just move on. And the child picks up our confidence. Am I going to be okay? Can I handle this? Will I not? And it's really the same thing that I think often in what is a really important context of we want to make sure our children are feeling loved and that we're giving them that emotional support. Sometimes it's hard to just remember that there's another side and we have to navigate the two together. They also need security. They also need boundaries. They do not need us to hover over them because in addition to creating Yiras Shamayim issues, Kabbalah Soil, we're not helping them emotionally. And then often it's like, my child's really sensitive, then it becomes like the school thing and whatever, like you need to just make it exceptions. My child's really sensitive. Now, yes, there are children who are very sensitive, but are we doing something to help our child get past their challenges and sensitivities and handle life. And that really goes to the same core of boundaries and discipline and clarity and security. All that applies as well. I want to end really briefly with two other points that relate to this as well. And that is, in addition to the ruchnius part of Yiras Shamayim, neshama things, and an atmosphere of Kabbalah soil. We will talk more about this, Mirz Hashem, next time in terms of transmitting values, but we need to make sure our children are hearing. We talked about B'hinei Hashem Nitzav Olav, that we're talking about the Eibishter at home. In other words, transfer the Kabbalah soil to Kabbalah soil Malchus Shamayim, right? If they understand what obedience is, now who do we have to listen to? Hashem should be, like it says, Shem Shamayim Shagar B'fiv is the expression, right? That the name of Hashem, like Yaakov Avinu, right? It's just like on his tongue. There are so many ways to put Hashem into everyday conversation. Let them hear it. It's not just what we have to do. It's Hashem. Hashem is watching you. Hashem is listening. Hashem is so proud of you. Let's ask Hashem for help finding your toy. Hashem, can you please help us find Mendel's toy that got lost? Hashem, Mushki has a boo-boo, please make it feel better. Thank you, Hashem, for da-da-da-da-da, right? Like the asking, thanking, pointing out Hashgacha Pratis, like the Rebbe says, that in today's generation, we can teach Chassidus to children. Any deep concept of Chassidus, Hashgacha Pratis, that Hashem is creating the world from scratch every moment, that Hashem is everywhere and everything. The loftiest ideas we can bring down to children's level, and if we can't, we probably don't understand it ourselves. So we just need to do a little more learning. The simplest things, and they're not so complicated. So if you just tell a child like Hashem is recreating the world, like Hashem is Hashem is just making the world all over every moment. So it's that simple. They don't need a much more complicated understanding. Hashgacha Pratis, it just is what it is. They take it at face value. So just pointing out Hashgacha Pratis doesn't mean coincidence. Like, ooh, look how neat that was. Hashgacha Pratis means Gamzu L'Taiva. It was for sure Hashgacha Pratis that happened. Maybe we'll find out why. Maybe we won't. Hashem wanted that to happen. Let's look for what could be the reason or what opportunity for a mitzvah we might have now that we're stuck in traffic. But consciously bring Hashem into the sentence, into the conversation. And when Hashem is a real concept in the home, he's real. He's we like to put our children to sleep. Everyone has their own. I think every family's got their own, little spiel putting their kids to bed. So one of the things we have her say with our children as they go to sleep is like, mommy loves you, Tati loves you, Hashem loves you, the Rebbe loves you, etc. Like, there's many ways of doing that, but like say that with them. The Rebbe says that there's a minhag of mothers to have their little child kiss the mezuzah when they go to sleep, and that's a fine minhag that should be continued. And the message the child gets basically is it's sort of like, good night, Hashem, I know you're with me in my room and watching me. And the same thing could be with saying goodnight to the Rebbe's picture, et cetera, et cetera. Like really just make the Eibishter, and by extension as well, the Rebbe, just real to them, because we're always talking about them. So they're just, it's part of my life. There's an Eibishter, he's watching me, I talk to him, he listens to me. And then a child will say like, yeah, it happened because I really asked Hashem that this should happen, and that's why it happened. Like that, naturally they're gonna come up with that, because we're always doing that. We're saying, please Hashem, but oh, look, Hashem, helped us find it. Thank you, Hashem. And it's true, but they're not just going to pick it up with themselves. What backfires?
My 5-year-old will be like, Hashem made me do it. I'm like,
and that's an opportunity. And that's an
conversation.
opportunity, right? But that's a teachable moment. That's a teachable moment for Hakol B'Yedei Shamayim Chutz Miyiras Shamayim. Hashem gives us opportunities. Hashem does not. It's very simple. Hashem gives us opportunities, and it's up to us to choose how to respond. So yes, Hashem made it a challenge, and he was waiting to see if we could win the Yetzer Hara, right?
Or like, I find that like the slow songs that I listen to before sleep are always very sad, like all the English ones,
Right.
unfortunately. And one was like the song about Torah.
Right.
It's like a very long song.
Right?
I was made way back in that
Yeah,
song.
The Torah
So
song.
my son was like asking me like for the story of it, and then he was like, "But why didn't Hashem protect them?" Like,
Great.
'cause
So I'm
like,
gonna leave,
I was
right?
telling Hashem,
I'm gonna leave that for
"Don't
next
worry,
time,
don't
right?
worry."
How to transmit the welcome, but it's not, it's a teachable moment. It's an opportunity. There's so much we want to teach our children. So I'm going to leave it, I'm going to leave it for next time, Ritz Hashem, but really there's so much we want to transmit to them. And a lot of times, like, it comes up, right? Rather than like a scheduled drasha, it's like they ask a question. It's like, great, that's a wonderful opportunity to teach you something. And we'll discuss that next time, Ritz Hashem. But for now, like, it's just, remember the Yerushalayim doesn't come out of nowhere. Like, Yerushalayim comes from feeling, V'hine Hashem needs of olav, the feeling that Hashem is here always watching me. The child's going to pick that up if we're just constantly referring to Hashem as, yeah, he's here and he's looking at it, just putting him into the conversation, like noticing how many times do I say Hashem throughout the day? Just keep add it more and add Rebbe, and it will make it real in the child's life. And finally, final piece to this is, back to the concept of Tzivos Hashem. And this is part of Tzivos Hashem as well, right? The concept of commander-in-chief, right? Child's being raised that we are serving the commander-in-chief. They should constantly realize the mitzvahs they're doing. Why, I would say one more thing, like, why can we do this on Shabbos? You could just say it's a malacha, because Hashem said so, right? Because this is one of the 39 malachas that Hashem said we can't do on Shabbos. The more we make that connection, that the mitzvahs are Hashem's mitzvahs, the more they get it. And that's part of Tzivos Hashem. The last thing is obviously mission training, meaning the actual, beyond what we expose them to, the pictures, the kosher pictures, the Yiddish music, the kosher food that we're feeding them and everything else, there is consciously the mitzvahs that we have them do, that we're training them to do, that help them cultivate Yiras Shamayim. So there's one, just a few lines here that says to a mother that you should be careful and mishtadel zayin, try hard, einpflanzen, to ingrain in the children in yanim v'chazayin forbunim Yiras Shamayim, matters related to Yiras Shamayim. In other words, there are specific mitzvahs, and for the most part, they're really kind of like the routine mitzvahs that children start doing at a young age. And it's both, these mitzvahs have an inherent connection to Yiras Shamayim, and that's why they're so important for young children. But also you could say the very fact, just like Tzivos Hashem and the missions, the very fact that they're getting used to, like, there are missions from Hashem, and you do them on a regular basis every day, you do this. The combination of the two really builds Yiras Shamayim. The Rebbe points out specifically that they should wear yarmulkes, talis katan, they should be careful to say moeda'ani, brachas, birchas hanenin, right? Brachas before and after eating, Shema Yisrael, etc. Like all the sort of routine mitzvahs, every day, every morning you do this, whenever you eat, you do that, whenever you go to sleep, you do such and such. These are mitzvahs that have a lot to do with building a child's Yiras Shamayim. And it's not, we want to sort of, we'll talk about the Eibishter in general terms and sort of eventually they're going to pick it up. No, it's like you think of davening, whatever you remember davening for as long as you can remember, like this was always part of davening, that always feels less negotiable than the things you remember adding when you were, 13, right? Or more. The younger something, right? It is. It's like, what do you mean? You don't walk out of bed without Negelbasser. But the younger a child gets that, and the younger we train them to do it, we help them do it, we ensure somehow that it happens, and brachas for food from when they're starting to talk, or even before, and we say it with them, like the younger that's ingrained, the more it's just pashut. Like, of course, you don't put food in your mouth without a bracha, of course, whatever. And Yiras Shamayim boils down to that. It's not some nice meditation only. It's a certain, like, automatic, like, for sure, obviously, you do this mitzvah all the time. So in short, what we have is, Yiras Shamayim being critical to Yiddishkeit and therefore to the chinuch of our children. And in summary, a few of the ways, and there may be more, just, a few thoughts, ways that we build that is one, through all the minhagim of what we surround and feed the child, etc., feed their neshama, ensuring that the child's growing up with clarity and discipline and guidance, Kabbalah soul at home, making Hashem real in the conversation in the home, and as early and young as possible, training them in the actual mitzvahs a Yiddish child should be doing. And I think the combination of all of them, obviously with a lot of davening and siyata d'shmaya, kind of comes out in a child as what we're looking for it to be, right? What we started with, that a child comes out with a sense of Hashem needs of Allah, that you actually need to, Hashem is calling you on the phone and he gave you a mitzvah, and of course you're going to do it. I want to finish with one story, then we'll take a little more questions, that I find very powerful. There was one time that the Rebbe spoke at Farbrengen about a shliach who was interviewed on the radio. He was asked about Yiddishkeit and how it seems archaic and it seems old-fashioned and, you know, it seems authoritarian because, like, you know, someone decided they want to eat a cheeseburger or they want to smoke a cigarette on Shabbos or whatever the case might be. Why is it anyone's business? And why does he get, you know, it was something that gets malchus. I don't remember exactly what the example was. It was something that gets malchus. He's like, you know, if someone did something in the privacy of their own home, so, you know, what's 39 lashes? It's so cruel, it's so barbaric, it's so blah, 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 you know, so not modern. It's the late 1960s. And the shliach wasn't really sure what to say, so he kind of, you know, got out of it by saying, you know, it's not really the way punishments work in Torah. You had to have 2 witnesses, you had to have a warning, blah, blah, blah. You know, a beis din that punished someone once, that killed someone once in 70 years was considered a murderous beis din. It was almost impossible to get any of these punishments in Torah. Like, didn't really happen like that. So the Rebbe spoke about it for bringing, and so what kind of answer is this? Because that's apologetic. You know, apologizing for Yiddishkeit, basically. You're basically saying you're right, but, you know, it never really happened. Like, no, that's not an answer. And the Rebbe says, this is what he should have said. So I guess it's just when the Rebbe calls you out for bringing, and teaches a lesson from that. And it says, you know, you should have taken advantage of Hashgacha Pratis, what just happened. They just had the first launch to the moon. And he should have used that as a lesson. What's the lesson? Says Rebbe, imagine the billions of dollars that the United States government invested and the years and years of research and everything that went into this mission, this space mission. And after all the research and all the investment and everything else, they finally chose a particular astronaut. They got his suit, he's all ready. He's the one that's chosen to lead the space mission to the moon. And he's all stressed out after all the preparations, and he's sitting there in the space shuttle, which is about to launch, and he takes out a cigarette because he wants to chill. Now, imagine if they could catch him before he blows up the whole thing. What would be the response? What would be the reaction? How would people feel? And he would say, but it's my life. I'm stressed out. I need to light a cigarette. Excuse me, but would everyone tell him? No, it's not your private life. Who do you think you are? You right now represent the entire United States, and so much has been invested in you. No, you can't afford to just do what you want to do right now. You're not a private individual. You carry the responsibility and the weight of so much. Says the Rebbe, every single Yid is part of this space mission that was launched, what is at this point 5,781 years ago. The world was created to be a home for Hashem. And how many neshamas, how many Yidden gave their lives on Mesiras Nefesh, how many Yidden lived on Mesiras Nefesh, how many mitzvahs have been done, how much has been invested in this mission. And you get to a point where the space shuttle's about to launch, and one particular Yid is sitting there and has been entrusted with a particular few tasks that they need to do to get to the next step. And this Yid says, I can't be bothered. It's uncomfortable. I'm hot. I'm not in the mood. I don't feel like it, whatever. But you're not a private individual. All these millions of neshamas are looking down at you and relying on you, continuing and finishing this space mission and finally bringing the world to the geula that it needs to get to. Who do you think you are? Like, just who do you think you are? Do you realize how consequential your actions are? So sort of in that context, is it a wonder, you're wondering 39 lashes, like, do we realize the severity of what this is? And I think the point is not the lashes, the point is realizing that what we want to be transmitting to our children is a sense of the awesome responsibility, the achrayus, the seriousness of what they're doing. It's not just a nice Yiddishkeit that we have. We want them to love it, we want them to think it's beautiful. We want them to just gravitate towards it. But we want them to grow to understand what it means you're a Yid. The Eibishter needs you. It's not an option. What, you're going to let the space shuttle just fall apart? As the Rambam says, right? It's like the world's like a scale, and like you can tip the whole world. You can be the one that your particular mitzvah right now is going to take this whole world and bring it to geula. Can you really afford not to? Can the world afford that you shouldn't? And that sense of achrayus is, with all these, all of this together, is really the sense and the feeling that we hope our children will grow up with. All right, take a few minutes in case someone has last questions, otherwise we'll leave the rest for next time. Anyone else? We're good for now? All right, thank you everybody for joining us. Hatzlacha to all of us in transmitting this, every little step in the right direction. It all matters, it all helps. Thank you.
I noticed it doesn't say Netherlands here in the paragraph.